Gotta stop doing that. Putting the banner over my face. Hi, everybody. All right. It's nice to see you all here. I got to tell you all, we did a crazy hour and 15-minute progressive coffee hour here yesterday for our Patreon only subscribers. And I actually went back and watched it last night, and because I was wondering how I managed to talk for that long. And I just want to encourage everybody who is a Patreon subscriber to go watch it if you haven't already. And if you're not a Patreon subscriber, that broadcast alone may be a reason to get you in, because one of the things that I did there was talk about all the reasons why we need to really work together and how to work in your own communities to make sure that you're doing what needs to be done for 2024. So I want to thank all our subscribers for being here. As always, you guys are awesome. And if you want to get in on the coffee hour and the question thread that goes live 2 hours before every single broadcast, you can head on over to patreon.com/resistance live and subscribe. I thought yesterday's broadcast was actually really great. Okay, in any event, I'm ACM. Welcome back if you're coming back, and welcome if you're new here. This is Resistance Live. I am, as always, coming to you from occupied Tongva land here in Southern California, and it is the 18th of September, 2023. My pronouns are she, her. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, I am wearing a white, and you can't really see it, but white and red striped sweater. My hair is down. I am a pink-skinned woman with blonde hair and green eyes. I have my hoop earrings in. I got a little bit of a, I don't know, pinky lipstick on today. And I'm really glad you're here. We're in for another week this week, and I just really want everybody to be prepared because there's so much happening already this morning that, once again, it's kind of hard to keep track. And I feel like I have to say this a lot these days because even for me, someone who practiced in federal court for 15 years at the highest levels of the legal profession, and most of my practice during that time was either in DC or in New York City. Even I have these moments where I look at what's on deck and what's happening legally right now, and I'm like, wow. I mean, it's a lot. And so I want to just, remind you that if you feel overwhelmed, even folks like me have trouble sometimes keeping track of everything that's happening. And I don't want anybody to feel like they don't understand what's going on, and therefore somehow that's their fault, because it's not. It's really an issue that all of us are facing down right now, and that's why we're here, of course. So if you get something out of today's video, or you just like us, hit that like button below, hit subscribe, hit the bell notification so you know every time we go live, and don't forget to subscribe at patreon.com/resistance live. All right. So the big news this morning, especially for those of us who refused to watch Kristen Welker's interview with Donald Trump yesterday, is that Trump made some statements in that interview, which apparently was taped on Thursday, to the effect that he hoped Mark Meadows would stay loyal to him. And I have to tell you guys that when I saw the reporting on this, because the New York Times did a piece about it overnight, when I saw the reporting about this and sat down to really think about it in the context particularly of the motion that was unsealed on Friday by Jack Smith's team asking for a limitation on what Trump is allowed to comment on outside of court. Again, I'm going to remind you all, it's not a gag order. It's I know the media is running with that as an easy term, but it is not a gag order. It is a very limited motion under a local criminal procedure rule to stop Trump from making comments outside of the courtroom that could influence the jury, threaten the prosecutors, the jury pool, the judge, and otherwise influence the jury pool generally. Okay, that's all it is. It's not designed to gag him. It's just designed to limit what he's allowed to say out of court on a very limited scope of topics. Okay, one of the things that's really clear, however, after that, and by the way, I did a special broadcast on that entire motion on Friday night that you can go watch. One of the things that's really clear after seeing that motion is that Trump's legal team has been aware for quite some time, not just because of warnings by the judge prior to that motion about Trump's extrajudicial statements, but also because of warnings against Trump's lawyers themselves about what they were saying, that Trump and his team urgently needed to not make comments that could arguably be considered witness tampering, interference, obstruction of justice, threats, and the like. All right. And Trump saying in a publicly recorded interview on Meet the Press that he hopes Meadows stays loyal to him and doesn't flip is exactly the kind of statement that this entire motion is designed to prevent. It is like witness tampering per se, because basically it's about influencing the witness's testimony. So the real question that I have now, and that I've had for quite some time, if you've been here for a while, you've heard me talk about this kind of nonstop, is the build, all right? Because as I've said repeatedly over the last few weeks here, you can't just make one statement that, arguably runs afoul of your bail conditions and be removed from the public domain and into pretrial detention instantly. All right. Usually there is kind of a build of warnings and then additional limitations and then motions and then potentially a motion to revoke bail. All right. We are probably 3/4 of the way up that mountain right now with the motion that Jack Smith has filed on Friday. And the thing that's really noticeable about this is that Jack Smith's lawyers, his team, consulted with Donald Trump's lawyers in advance of filing that motion. So he knew on the day that interview was taped that this motion to limit what he was allowed to say under Local Criminal Rule 57.1 was coming. And he said those things anyway. And that in and of itself indicates to the judge, in addition to all the other things that were cited in that motion. And I really encourage you to go back and watch Friday's special broadcast, which is linked on this channel under like breaking news broadcast. You can go watch it, about all the statements that Trump had made before that point that arguably ran afoul of influencing the jury, threatening the judge, the prosecutors, potentially the jury pool, threatening witnesses, interfering with witnesses, tampering with their potential testimony, all these many, many, many things that he has said up before this moment that were already potentially going to make him subject to further limitations. And that in and of itself, if I was the judge, would raise very serious concerns about whether or not even a limited motion on his extrajudicial statements, a limited order rather on his extrajudicial statements is going to be enough to stop him from doing this. Okay. So we are in a place right now where, he is really playing with fire. And my bet is that this order is going to be entered, as I said in Friday's broadcast. There's no reason not to enter it. Jack Smith's team has Supreme Court authority and a wealth of local authority on why it is okay to enter a limited order, limiting speech about the case outside of the trial. Okay, there's like literally a Supreme Court case. Again, I encourage you to go back and watch Friday's emergency broadcast. There's literally a Supreme Court case that allows this. Okay, there's no reason for her not to enter this order. And if he continues to do it, if he continues to run afoul of the warnings and then an order, the result is going to be that he's going to end up in pretrial detention. Now, there may be an intervening additional step, which is like Trump's not allowed to say anything about the trial on social media or in interviews. She may limit him to that degree. And if he runs afoul of that, then the only way to stop him from engaging in witness tampering and jury interference is going to be pretrial detention. So, again, I know there's a lot of us who are like, why isn't he already in prison? Because it doesn't work that way. And again, he's got conditions of release as well in Fulton County that he's already running afoul of. So there are multiple instances now and multiple prosecutions where all it's going to take is the judge saying enough is enough. And he's going to end up with really severe pretrial conditions that are going to limit what he can say up to and including pretrial detention. So all of this is looming. And I think that we all should be very aware that, of course, because he is a malignant narcissist, the closer that he gets to any form of real consequence, the more inflamed his commentary is going to become. Now, to answer this question, do I think he wants detention to fuel his base? I don't think it really matters at this point. I think he's already playing the victim card. One of the things that's really crazy about malignant narcissists is they can engage in all sorts of abhorrent behavior and somehow still spin it as if they're the victim. He's going to do it anyway. I mean, and the thing that I just want to say from our side of the fence is we've got to stop being so terrified of his impact. All right. I mean, I said this, I think last Friday morning when we were talking about this exact topic as well, which is that too many of us on this side of the fence are too worried about the 20% of this base. Yes, there are 20% rather of the country that's still in the cult. All right. Yes, there are threats of random violence, but I'm going to remind everybody we're living in a country where there's like open carry guns in so many states, and AR-15s are legal in so many states. And, unfortunately, that means that any one of us could experience a mass shooting at any moment. All right. And I really don't want anyone to be in a position where you are going to stop doing the necessary work of getting Joe Biden reelected because you're worried about his base thinking he's a martyr. His base already thinks he's a martyr, and they're going to soak up and swallow every single thing that he says. So it's not going to matter if he ends up in pretrial detention. I'm just going to say that. And by the way, I'm also just going to add, Fulton County, I'm sure, will be very prepared for that outcome. So, by the way, will be the DC police, the Capitol Police, and any federal law enforcement office that could be charged with maintaining the peace in the event that he is subject to pretrial detention. I'm not worried. Okay. We're not in a position like January 6th where we have Trump in office as the president controlling what law enforcement is allowed to do on the federal level. All right. That's not the circumstance anymore. And there's been an enormous amount of preparation, even before Trump was indicted in Fulton County. And we know that the DC police, the Capitol Police have been on high alert essentially since January 6th, 2.5 years ago. So I don't want anybody to fundamentally think that, this is the other thing I just have to say about it. We spend too much time on our side of the fence worrying about what Trump thinks and why he's doing it. All right. This is the reality. He is violating the terms of his pretrial release. All right. He's violating him on the daily. All right. And he's doing things that threaten witnesses, threaten the judge, threaten prosecutors, threaten the jury pool, and are essentially designed to throw the result before the trial is even started. You're not allowed to do that. Okay. You have no free speech right to do that. So let's look at the conduct and what the limitations on the conduct are supposed to be and worry about that. All right. I don't really care why he's doing it at this point. We all know why he's doing it. He's a malignant narcissist and he's terrified of going to prison. He's trying to win in the court of public opinion. He's trying to get witnesses to lie for him. All of it is obvious. We don't really need to spend time speculating on that, frankly. I mean, we have so many other things that are better engagements of our time that, I think that we really need to just stop spinning out about this. Okay. So that's the first bit of news this morning. The second thing also relates to Mark Meadows, which is that his emergency appeal brief before the 11th Circuit is due today. All right. And again, I'm going to remind everybody, the 11th Circuit is moving very quickly on this. This is like warp speed. Again, I talked about this on a broadcast last week as well. Fani Willis's response is due a week from today, and Mark Meadows' reply brief is due later on that week. So we have the potential of a resolution of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals situation by the end of next week, maybe potentially the week after. That's going to lead to an appeal before the Supreme Court. And, I'm just going to tell you, the 11th Circuit could totally reject this just on the basis of the papers alone. They could do a per curiam opinion that's like, nope, lower court decision upheld, try your chances at the Supreme Court, good luck. So I'm not at this point, terribly worried about this one either, because it's very obvious what's going on there. Again, the 11th Circuit has asked for briefing on whether or not a former federal employee can invoke the section that Meadows tried to invoke to remove the case. I don't think he really stands a snowball's chance in hell of having this overruled by the 11th Circuit. Okay. The other thing that's happening today, speaking of removal, is Jeffrey Clark's evidentiary hearing on his removal petition in the Northern District of Georgia is underway this morning. And one of the really weird things that has happened today that nobody could have predicted, this definitely wasn't on my bingo card, is that 91-year-old former Attorney General Edwin Meese, who, by the way, resigned in disgrace from the Reagan administration, has written a brief in support of Jeffrey Clark. It's like, okay, I have to tell this brief little story about when I was in law school. So you all know I started law school in 1994. It's been almost like 30 years now, which is really crazy. But I started law school in 1994. And in my first year of law school, the two fellows who taught my introductory legal research and writing course were in the civil division of the DOJ. And they took us to the DOJ as a part of our work in that course. And we had a whole tour of the DOJ and we met all these DOJ officials. And this is one of the benefits of going to law school in Washington, D.C. is you're like right up the road from that, right? And while we were walking down the hallway, and these were two very progressive guys, like really extraordinary lawyers doing all sorts of, really important civil rights work. They were in the civil rights division, rather, not the civil division. There's two differences. And they walked us through the hallway by the attorney general's office. And outside the attorney general's office, there are photographs of all the past attorney generals. And we walked past the particular section that was all of Reagan's attorneys general, including Edwin Meese. And the two guys who taught my class were joking around about how it was prisoners' row because so many of Reagan's attorneys general had engaged in criminal activity while being attorneys general. And Edwin Meese is one of them. Okay. So one of the things that we all need to remember here is that birds of a feather stick together. And I don't think Edwin Meese's 91-year-old opinion, whatever it is now, 5 decades after he left office, 4 decades after he left office, is going to bear much weight in front of this judge. But one of the things that people should be aware of, just in the context of Jeffrey Clark's motion, which is a losing motion, I just want to make it really clear, I don't think there is any chance that he's going to succeed on removal, is that he's claiming that all these things he did, these recommendations he made, these legal memos that he wrote to interfere in the state elections were within the purview of his federal employment. So I want to remind everybody of two really important facts. The first is that prior to 2020, Jeffrey Clark was in charge of the Natural Resources Division of the DOJ. The Natural Resources Division. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand that the Natural Resources Division of the DOJ has literally nothing to do with elections. Nothing. Like literally nothing. Okay? He's not an elections official. The federal government doesn't have a right, no matter what, to interfere in the election structures of the states. So this is all kind of like garbage, all right? Then in 2020, he became the acting director of the civil division of the DOJ. Now, while the civil division of the DOJ does have an elections investigations unit, and they do have an election crimes unit attached to it, those are for federal election related issues, okay? They are not in any way, shape, or form charged with any authority to meddle in the election results of states. And so when Jeffrey Clark went off the rails and wrote this crazy memo that had no basis in law that recommended to Donald Trump that they engage in this fraudulent elector scheme, which was basically about, as we all know, putting fraudulent slates of electors in place in the states to overthrow state election results, he was so far outside the scope of any liminal authority that he might have had that there is no way that he's going to succeed on this removal motion. I mean, I'm actually quite fundamentally stunned that he's even trying to do this. I mean, it's so far gone and so far removed. And he, by the way, also has no experience in this realm. So even the idea that he's writing in that role a legal memo that's being used by the president of the United States to arguably overthrow American democracy, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's so far outside the bailiwick of what his responsibilities even would have been. It's sort of hard to describe. So again, that evidentiary hearing is underway this morning. I'm just going to remind everybody, Mark Meadows testified in his evidentiary hearing and shot himself in the foot and shot Donald Trump in the foot. And I can't imagine that any testimony from Jeffrey Clark and his witnesses is going to do anything different. So that's something to absolutely watch at this point. Okay. This morning, or rather late last night, Trump filed his reply brief on the recusal motion for Judge Chutkan in the DC District Court. I'm sorry. Again, I have these moments, you guys know, where I just have to laugh because the arguments that are being made are so insane that you just like literally can't, you can't even wrap your head around it. Okay, so I'm going to remind everybody, the basis of the recusal motion that it's trying to get Judge Chutkan to step off the case is that she made certain statements in sentencing hearings related to other January 6th defendants about the fact that people who had organized January 6th had not yet been held responsible. And in the course of those statements, because this is, by the way, her judicial duty, she said, I have opinions, but they don't matter here. What matters is the facts and what matters is the evidence. All right. That in and of itself shows that she was being fair and impartial in the way that she was administering those sentencing hearings. Okay. But the reply brief does something really bonkers, which is that it claims that these statements by Judge Chutkan are extrajudicial, okay? And what extrajudicial means is that they are statements that are made outside of a court of law, all right? So they're statements that are made like in public interviews, like the way Trump is doing right now. They're statements that are made to like the press, all right? They're statements that are made at maybe like a lecture you give at a law school, all right? They're not statements that are made in a court of law. And in fact, one of the big points that was made in Jack Smith's opposition brief is that all of the statements are actually intrajudicial. They're statements that are made inside the courtroom as a part of official judicial proceedings, all right? And that in and of itself is a reason to deny the motion for recusal, because she was just doing her job. And as we pointed out about this last week on the broadcast, one of the things that's also really significant here is that judges are encouraged in sentencing hearings to explain the rationales for their sentencing rulings, all right? And that can include things like, I'm not sentencing you at the highest possible level because the people who are actually responsible for the bulk of your crimes have not yet been brought to justice. That is an entirely reasonable statement for a judge to make as a part of a sentencing hearing. So this recusal motion is like trash, all right? Now, in the reply brief, Trump's attorneys are asking for oral argument. Judge Chutkan doesn't have to grant an oral argument hearing on this. She can simply rule on the papers. And frankly, I think it's a waste of all of our time and her time and judicial resources for her to hold a hearing. But she may decide to do that anyway. Again, I'm going to remind you, it's federal court. That means no televisions. But whether or not she decides to grant oral argument, I think we're going to find out like within the next 24 hours. My bet is that she may do that just to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But I think we're going to have a ruling on this like within a matter of days, one way or another. All right. And I'm not expecting, the other thing I have to remind everybody of, which I said last week, is that in the event that she opts not to recuse, there's like literally no chance in hell that any appeal on this issue is going to be successful, because whether or not to recuse is well within the discretion of the trial court. It is like almost never challenged on appeal. And if it is challenged on appeal here, it's not going to be reversed. So I am just not concerned about this one either. All right. And I'm just going to remind everyone, I did a whole broadcast last week on the fact that Trump's legal strategy is trash. Like every single motion that they're filing is just like garbage. And, you can go watch that if you want my deeper opinions on how the legal advice that is being implemented here, while not rising to the standard of ineffective assistance of counsel, is still like really trashy, bad strategy. This whole motion is bad strategy. Like, you don't want to file a motion for a judge to recuse themselves unless you have a really legitimate basis for it, because chances are solid that the judge will not recuse themselves in the event that there isn't a legitimate basis for it, because that's not what judges do. And then you've had a whole battle in front of the judge who could potentially send you to prison for life, kind of probably not being very happy with you, even while still maintaining, impartiality. Yes, thank you all for the reminders. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up here and subscribe. The thumbs up does help to get all this good information out into the YouTube ecosphere. All right. No, the lawyers are not going to lose their licenses for this. Okay. So I have to remind everybody, this is Jen's question, by the way. You lose your license for doing something that's really profoundly unethical. The arguments here are like Rudy Giuliani lost his law license for advocating for the overthrow of American democracy. Okay. We have, additional disbarment proceedings pending against in fact, I think numerous defendants actually in the Fulton County case, but there have been recent hearings about disbarment of the lawyers who were directly involved in all the stuff related to the overthrow and the attempted overthrow and the fraudulent elector scheme related to January 6th ongoing already. Because what they've done is a violation of law. Like, you don't keep your law license if you committed a crime, but if you make an arguably relevant argument in front of a federal judge, you're not going to be disbarred for that. All right. You may be sanctioned for filing like a frivolous motion, but disbarment requires a whole other level of stuff. And again, I have to remind you that the most frequent basis for disbarment is commingling of attorney and client funds. That's one of the reasons why Michael Avenatti was disbarred, among many other reasons that are entirely justifiable. But, you have to do really, really unethical things to lose your law license. And this is not one of them. Okay. All right. Let's see. Hunter Biden has gone on the offensive, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on all these ridiculous things that the Republicans are saying about Hunter Biden, or the fact that he was indicted on a charge that no one's ever prosecuted on. By the way, I just have to remind everybody, I'm also not going to spend any time on Lauren Boebert, but in the event that Lauren Boebert was smoking something other than tobacco in that vape pen, and she owns a gun, she could be, which we know she does because she does all this advertising with guns, she could be prosecuted for the same crime that Hunter Biden is currently being prosecuted for. So I don't want anybody to like miss the potential hypocrisy of that situation. Also, reminder: Adam Frisch lost his last election to Lauren Boebert by just 546 votes. He's running against her again. She can be kicked out of office in the next election cycle if Adam Frisch has the money to run a really solid advertising campaign. So, don't forget about that. All right. But Hunter Biden has done something in the last 2 business days, which I honestly think is long overdue. And what he is doing is he's filed 2 different civil lawsuits. One of the lawsuits is against the IRS for disclosing confidential taxpayer information in the testimony that has been provided to Congress. Okay. And that is a really very serious and very real allegation, right? You're not supposed to disclose private taxpayer information in any kind of a public forum. All right. And this IRS whistleblower has disclosed private taxpayer information about Hunter Biden that's not supposed to be in the public domain. Okay. So that's one case that's been filed. The second case that he's filed is against a former White House official from the Trump administration who publicized the contents of his laptop. And that, by the way, is a privacy violation, as well as potentially a computer fraud violation. So all of this sort of stuff is really important, because what it's doing is pushing back against the idea that the things that have happened to Hunter Biden are legitimate, all right? And that they're not, the people who are doing all of this are violating the law while they're doing it. So I think that it's a really strong strategic move on Hunter Biden's part. And by the way, like, raises the bar a little bit here, which is that, you want to make certain claims about what Hunter Biden has on his taxes. You better be prepared to meet the piper if you get that information unlawfully. And so I do think that standing up for yourself, even as a former addict, when you are being treated in ways that are clearly being manipulated by the far right and that are against the law, adds a new and important layer to the discussion about everything that Hunter Biden has been through and why he is a target. All right. So I just want people to be aware of that. And I think it's really important, frankly. I mean, we'll see what happens with it. It's more important that he's done it, frankly, than what the outcome of it is going to be. Because what it is doing is it's added a talking point to the political stratosphere that he is being persecuted, because he is, right? And people are breaking the law to do it, just to create a distraction from the fact that Donald Trump has been indicted 91 times. All right. All right. Or for 91 crimes, as the case may be. All right. Somebody asked a question about the statute of limitations on January 6th indictments. And I just have to say that one of the things that's really key here that I want people to understand is that there are different statutes of limitations for different crimes. So what the statute of limitations might be for any given crime depends upon the crimes that are alleged. And the crimes that are alleged depend on the conduct. All right. So let's just say hypothetically that you are somebody who just paid for a couple of buses. Hi, Jenny Thomas. Paid for a couple of buses to drive people to DC for the January 6th insurrection. Okay. I have debates about whether or not that's even criminal conduct, but let's just say hypothetically you were engaged in a conspiracy to help overthrow the election as a result of that, and your conduct was paying for buses to get people to the election. All right. And let's just say hypothetically that you donated money as a part of that to some militias that then were engaged in attempts to overthrow the government. And, the argument can be made that you are a part of a conspiracy. Okay. That's going to have a very different statute of limitations. And, some of this also depends on where it's being prosecuted, because different crimes have different statutes of limitations in different states. What may have a 5-year statute of limitation in, let's say, hypothetically, Arizona, could be very different in New York State or different in the District of Columbia. All right. But also, let's just say hypothetically that, you're somebody else who beat in the head of a police officer with a flagpole. Okay. And you engaged in violence that caused, you engaged in assault fundamentally, because that's assault. A criminal assault charge is going to have a different statute of limitations in most instances than a straightforward basic conspiracy charge. All right. So there's no way to game out what the statute of limitations is going to be for any January 6th defendant or for any January 6th indictment, because it is so specifically targeted toward the conduct, the particular defendant, and the crimes alleged. All right. And again, one of the things I have to remind everybody here is that one of the reasons why Hunter Biden apparently was indicted last week was because the statute of limitations on this stupid gun charge, which, by the way, if it were somebody on the far right would be screaming about because of the Second Amendment. That statute of limitations on that particular charge is set to run in September, meaning like if they didn't file it by a certain date in September, which I think is this week, actually, they would have been beyond the statute of limitations and the case would have been time barred. So, again, statutes of limitations are real, but they're very, very different depending on where, the crime, the person, the conduct, all of that. All right. Okay. I spent a lot of time on yesterday's coffee hour for our Patreon only subscribers. Again, if you are a Patreon subscriber and you haven't watched it, go watch it. If you're not yet, head on over to patreon.com/resistance live and become a subscriber for as little as $2 a month. You get coffee hour. It's fun. I spent a lot of time yesterday talking about Ken Paxton's acquittal for his impeachment trial in the Texas legislature. And I don't really want to say much more about the result, but I do want to mention that there is a report in Axios that folks should be aware of about the fact that top Trump advisors apparently went all in on the Republican legislators in the Texas House with a pressure campaign that basically said, you either vote to acquit Ken Paxton or we're going to make sure you're primaried in every subsequent election in which you run. And that in and of itself should tell you all you need to know about Ken Paxton being the most senior law enforcement official in the state who is profoundly corrupt. Like there's kind of no disputing actually that a lot of the stuff that he engaged in was like straightforward bribery and corruption. Like the evidence didn't show anything else. All right. But the pressure campaign that was affected by the Trump people is new and breaking news. And so the only reason why I wanted to mention this morning is just to emphasize the stranglehold that the Trump people and Trump himself have on Republican politicians right now. One of the things that I just have to say about this is that I see all of this through the lens of like malignant narcissistic abuse, sociopathic abuse fundamentally, because, look, there are a lot of people who, when put in this kind of position, would basically like flip the finger to Trump's people and be like, I'm more ethical than that. All right. But again, the entire GOP has gone all in on this guy, which also is really stupid, right? Like, I said this so many times last week, but like they have a perfect out right now, right? They could all be saying like, Trump's been indicted 91 times, 91 counts, 91 crimes, right? Chances are really solid. Dude's going to be in federal prison or state prison by the time we get to the November 24 election. Let's walk away. Like we're done with this guy. That would be an option. All right. But then the level of threats that have been made to Republican politicians, and these are not just threats about their political careers, they're also threats of violence against their families, against their children, against their colleagues, right? Like all of this is an ongoing mechanism now inside the GOP. And, the other thing I just have to say about it is kind of like the snake eating their own tail, because Trump threatens to harm them, so they stay in bed with Trump. And then Trump threatens to harm them, so they stay in bed with Trump. And, there's an exit to this cycle if they would opt to invoke it. But, they're either too terrified or they're too concerned about losing power because, like, let's say it again here for like the 18,000th time. All of this is about white supremacy, misogyny, and late stage capitalism and corruption. But the reality of this is that, this particular pressure campaign was extremely effective because let's not forget the impeachment charges were originally brought by Republicans. Okay. And there are only two Republicans, and they're the Republicans who were involved in bringing the charges who voted to convict. All right. So the Texas Republican Party is corrupt. And, I don't think there's any doubts about that. And I talked on Coffee Hour at length yesterday about the future of Texas. The fact that we've got to remember that it is a heavily gerrymandered and voter suppressed state. And that people got to keep fighting. You got to keep fighting. All right. Very key. All right. Last thing that I just want to point to today, because, we just got through Rosh Hashanah, is that there were 6 separate credible bomb threats against synagogues this weekend. And that's not including all the other non-credible threats that were received. We've had Elon Musk go all in this weekend on these anti-Semitic George Soros conspiracy theories. And, it is more overt now than it has been since like 1930s Germany. All right. Like you literally have people out there saying like, this was something that Elon Musk said this weekend, liberal Jews want to take over the world. Right. I just have to say this because I say this about every marginalized group, but it's really important to kind of like remind everyone of this. Okay. All of the warning signs are there. And what is happening to Jewish people in America and around the world, what is happening to trans people in America and in other countries, not everyone, what is happening to LGBTQ Americans, what is happening to Black Americans, what is happening to immigrants and people fleeing violence for asylum in this country tells you everything you need to know about what the outcome of this will be in the event that Trump is reelected. So I just want to say one thing about this right now, because there's been so many questions on the question feed in the last couple of weeks about like Biden's age and Kamala Harris. And we've talked about the like inherent unspoken racism in all of that, because, Kamala Harris can't win if God forbid something happens to Biden. Okay. I just got to make something really clear here. All right. Voting for someone other than Biden Harris, or even entertaining the talking points that are being thrown out there right now, is going to end up in people's lives being lost. Like I'm not overstating this. All right. And Victor Shi said something really important over the weekend about this. He said, frankly, people need to wake up because people in my generation, Gen Z, are more worried about LGBTQ rights and abortion rights than they are about Biden's age. And you know what? That point is entirely legitimate. Because if you're not concerned right now about the potential threats of violence leading all the way to a final solution kind of situation, particularly not just for Jewish Americans, but for trans kids, for trans Americans, I don't know what to tell you. Like the writing is on the wall, folks. And, there are people, somebody said to me last week in the comments on YouTube that my statement about, nobody should be talking about Biden's age was just like parroting traditional Democratic talking points. No, it is not. It is facing down the reality that a vote for anyone other than Biden Harris in 2024 is going to cost people's literal lives. Okay. And we got to stop freaking around about this. Like, I'm really serious about this. We have to stop messing around with these stupid talking points about whether or not Biden is qualified to run again when he's only 3 years older than Donald Trump. We got to stop entertaining these dumb talking points about Kamala Harris not being qualified or able to run. These stupid talking points that are circulating that she should be replaced as the VP. This is all insidious efforts by people on the far right to undermine our efforts to save lives. Like, that's really what it's all about. All right. So, I know I'm preaching to the choir and everybody gets mad when I get ranty, and please turn down the volume if I'm too loud for you today. Sorry. All right. But these things really, really, really matter. Okay. These are not pie in the sky philosophical debates about age and holding office. This is about whether or not we're willing to take a chance on like another version of the final solution getting underway in America. So on that happy note, happy Monday. Like I said at the top of the broadcast, it's a really busy week. I really want to encourage you guys to head on over to the Patreon feed. If you have not done that already, get on over to patreon.com/resistance live. Subscriptions start as low as $2 a month. That's less than a dime per broadcast. You get the question feed, you get coffee hour. We have additional perks coming for people in the top tiers. I also just want to mention that, our Patreon community is incredibly amazing. I can't overstate it. So many good people doing so much good work to mobilize in their own communities. I also just want to mention that because there's been a request for this, I'm working this week on a video about how to win in 2024. It is not going to be a live. It's going to be a standalone video. It's going to be short. It's going to be very targeted. And it's going to contain a lot of the advice that I shared in yesterday's coffee hour, because the feedback was like over the top awesome in response to some of the things that I said. So that's going to drop, I think probably on Saturday when we're not broadcasting live. So stay tuned for that. But I really want you guys to remember that the work of saving democracy is not done watching videos that are designed to raise your cortisol levels on YouTube, okay? Which is not what I'm doing here. I'm pointing to other people who are like making like, you know, scandalous videos about the latest thing that's happened. That doesn't win elections. And I said this yesterday to our Patreon community. It's worth saying it here, okay? There's a difference between intent and impact in everything that we do, okay? And my intent is solid, but it's less important than my impact. And my plan here and my reason for being here is not to raise super PAC money, of which I take 50%. It's not to make scandalous videos that get me likes or clicks or, you know, anything else, okay? It's here because I want us to win in 2024. I'm here because I want us to win, because I believe in a better progressive future for America. And the more you like this video, the more that information is going to circulate. Okay. That's the reason why I'm asking for it. I'm not asking for it for any other reason. I think it's really important, by the way, that we all learn how to activate in our own communities. Even if you have never done this work before, you will not sway an election by liking a pithy video about Donald Trump. You will sway an election by learning how to talk to your neighbors and your friends and to organize in your community and get out the vote, do deep canvassing, not just door knocking, deep canvassing strategies year round. And by advocating in a way that sways people to get out of their houses and vote. All right. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that on Saturday's video. Again, it's not going to be a live, but it's going to drop sometime Saturday morning. I'll have more to say about that during the week. And I want to thank everybody here who's already doing all that great work where you live. All right. Much love to all of you. Really, really grateful for our Patreon subscribers and all their incredible work already. And, you know, we're heading toward our 7-year anniversary on this broadcast, which is crazy. So much love to everybody who's been here, both when we were public, then when we were just on Patreon, and now that we're back live on YouTube. I'm so grateful for all of you. And I will see you all here tomorrow at regular time. All right. Have a great Monday, everyone. Take care of yourselves. All right. Bye.